May I read you something from one of these testimonials? I'm doing these groups for 40 years with multicultural groups for, all over the world for 40 years, Alan. You know that, right? Uh,
Right.
Here's Duty. She says, our conscious conversations simply and gently yet profoundly reveal the truth that all of humanity has been seeking forever. In just a few minutes, as Sperry pointed our awareness to awareness itself, the illusion of separation began to dissolve. My sense of having a separate body melted in the warm, delicious energy that engulfed the whole group. Thoughts had no power and floated by like clouds. Emotions transformed into what I experienced to be the empty fullness spoken of by the sages, or eternal love itself. The embodiment of what cannot be adequately spoken of happened. It was blissful, and once experienced, nothing can or ever will be the same. This is life. This is a life-changing event.
Yeah.
This,
God, that's beautiful. I feel like I'm really gonna like Eddie, and Eddie, um, in many ways, is probably fully stepped into whatever the unique expression is. And for this here, uh, has went through a lot of stilling itself repeatedly in the last year and beyond, just be nobody, learn to not be anyone, learn to be space, learn to be love, learn to be that really first fully,
yeah,
and then now express. Now be space expressing itself to itself for waking up and healing and loving and meeting basic needs and all this good stuff.
yeah,
And that, I think that's a crucial thing, is to jump too quickly into the expression is to allow potentially a little bit of egoism to reside in that. And so there's a really deep importance to the process of purification, into that spaciousness, to that air, to that love, that then makes the expression more pure. At least that's what I felt in my direct experience. It's been really, really beautiful.
well, couldn't that's
Yeah.
the emptiness, the void that has no beginning and cannot be divided because there's no thing to divide. I mean, that's when this one is, fully void based. There's no boundary, there's no beginning or end. There's the eternal now, the omnipresent, omniscience, omnipotence, psychokinetic control over. People can't help but be completely peaceful in your presence. I mean, they
Yeah.
you're just one being. You're the verb of everything, and with them, and they're, when they ordinarily might be completely terrified and crazy, they're brought to total peace instantaneously just by being within a quarter mile of you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's
And
how,
in
that's exactly the vision, and that you and I
yes,
share that,
yes,
is big time.
yes, and I do want to, um, I want to also supportively include the, um, understanding of what Christ represented at the same time as we understand what Buddha represented, because more and more their emptiness and love are really two sides of the same coin. And for that, Christ being up on the cross is equivalent to anatta in Buddhism, the understanding that there is no self. And the more that you hang your sense of self, your ego, up on the cross, the more that you become space and love to serve others in the world. And so that's just I found to be the most crucial because you can bring almost all of the planet together with that style of interpretation and understanding.
Well, that's exactly the pivot, the eternal pivot point of the $27 million project, is getting the whole of humanity, because there is no other. Everything else is an artifice. That surrendered emptiness that gives rise to our presence it, it, it is the only peaceful place in the whole of existence.
Yeah.
And when we consciously share that we are consciousness, that consciousness is the void that cannot be divided, and we notice that consciously in a heartfelt, fully embodied way together, we realize what Gautama and Christ were holding out for. You know, why Christ would submit himself to be crucified for the salvation of humanity. That, you know, realize that you're all crucifying yourselves. I am you. You know, and so what is it that transcends death? I am that which transcends death. Who are you that transcends death? Who are we that transcend death, that are deathless and uncreated and unborn, which is the Buddha and the Hindus and the Atman, you know, Atman and the Anatta are the two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. Yeah. And from this, from this peace, from this love, um, it's just all possible from here. Heaven on earth, like we said.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's exactly it. Is that we are heavenly, we are spiritual, we are spirited, and there's nothing else that is truly meaningful except that which is, you know, oddly enough, meaningless. Doesn't need to have a meaning.
It's right. And just the moments of just non-proliferation, stop weaving, stop storytelling, stop games of identity, and just relax. Just see what's left when you deconstruct all those habits of identity and of location and of comparison and measurement and all that. And even just those little tiny glimpses of what remains when all that is declung from, that is healing and that is doing the work. And that is just so nourishing for that underlying piece that just wants to be you want to feel in union voidness, you want to feel in union with it, but the primary attractor, if you will, is to avoid it at all costs. Is like for the mind to weave endlessly so that it doesn't dissolve into space, into its nature. And that is just so beautiful. The math, the physics, the creativity, the ingenuity of the universe, the way it's designed. It's unbelievable.
Well, I've been working with this I've looked for this most brilliant physicist that could understand and discover and model the physics of consciousness, because the materialistic, mechanistic, scientific, military, industrial, political, medical establishment, it was very clear 45 years ago that the only value that could really shift them out of that tyrannical, totalitarian, materialistic focus was to discover what consciousness is in physics and describe it. And that has been achieved over the last 6 years in great rigor and depth. It took this one 45 years or a lifetime to do that. And so working with this, collaborating with this man who's just a couple of years older than I am. He is a physics professor for 35 years. He's written 100 papers. He's absolutely outstanding in his clarity. He's a scientific historian. The whole history, the development of our understanding of ourselves, our attempts to understand ourselves over from the very origins of speech until the present day, he has chronicled that with such clarity. It's amazing, this guy, Alan. May I read you something from one of these testimonials? I've been doing these groups for 40 years, with multicultural groups for, all over the world for 40 years, Alan. You know that, right?
Right.
Here's Judy. She says, our conscious conversation simply and gently yet profoundly revealed the truth that all of humanity has been seeking forever. In just a few minutes, as Sperry pointed our awareness to awareness itself, the illusion of separation began to dissolve. My sense of having a separate body melted in the warm, delicious energy that engulfed the whole group. Thoughts had no power and floated by like clouds. Emotions transformed into what I experienced to be the empty fullness spoken of by the sages, or eternal love itself. The embodiment of what cannot be adequately spoken of happened. It was blissful, and once experienced, nothing can or ever will be the same. This is life. This is a life-changing event.
Yeah.
This,
God, that's beautiful.
This is, here is John Jacob Zucker Gardner, who a professor of leadership at Seattle University, who assembled leaders of all huge corporations, maybe 20 years ago, brought them together at Stanford University. He came to a group when we, in Santa Barbara, maybe, I don't know, at least 15, 20 years ago, just after that. And we had a group at 4:30 a.m. in the morning with 12 of us, where we felt like there was no separation between any two atoms in our bodies. And we were so weightless that we literally felt like we could jump into the air and fly around like birds. Okay. So amazing ecstasies, and wow, shared so indivisibly, Alan. Oh my God. And so John said to me afterwards, he said, I always knew it had something to do with sharing undivided attention, but I didn't quite understand how to bring that into focus. And he had me up and introduced me to one of the grandsons of Mahatma Gandhi, who I just happened to sit down next to in one of the groups he had arranged. He brought me up into the Northwest there. And Mahatma Gandhi, Garan Gandhi, wanted me to do these groups online to his 200 city centers as to bring people into this state of nonviolent consciousness, like etc.
Right.
So here John says, the remarkable work of Sperry Andrews and the Human Connection Institute in developing ways to move people into collective and global consciousness is worthy of wide recognition and attention as we move From me to we, Sperry's work will serve as a guiding light to collective consciousness. So, there is this level at which we have to be the Atman. We have to be someone doing something because the nothingness is doing something by doing nothing. It's making all of form, all of space-time, energy, and matter, mind and body, indivisible. Every single moment that whether we're dead or we're alive, we're not dead. We're still the awakeness that is eternal and uncreated. So in order to align this neocortex with the nonverbal body, the sensory motor reptile that's been eating and being eaten for hundreds of millions of years, and what emerged and grew out of that, like out of a seed, emerged the heartfelt mammalian limbic system to make it possible so that we could have herds of mammals that could survive and thrive better in the same way that individual cells 1.6 billion years ago in the fossil record now has been discovered, had already begun to collaborate with other single cells to form multicellular organisms in the fossil record. That the indivisibility of all things has to foment this collaboration, like you and I, Alan. It seems that we've been birthing our individuality for some time here, where, as Bruce Lipton would say, we are these zygotes that have come together, and there's 50 trillion human cells collaborating with 10 to 20 times as many bacterial cells that are forming a single individuating, incomparably unique consciousness, as Alan, as Sperry, sitting here. And that as we, as individual human beings, as Carl Jung said, in the process of maturation, we recognize that we are indivisible from everyone and everything. Inevitably, we have a chance of having a conscious civilization on this planet. That you and I, Alan, in that we do recognize our indivisibility and the peace, the pure and total communion of unconditional true love that we actually, in fact, are together. That we cannot deny it any longer. That we're not losing a territory. We've survived by demarcating a separate physical and psychological territory as plants and animals for hundreds of millions of years. We have a habit that we're hypnotized to perpetuate. But by being so indivisible as a single indivisible consciousness, we can recognize that we don't have to go along with our programming, Alan. See what I'm saying?
Yeah. And the very nature of it is to delude itself in all of its programming and to wake up from that to heaven on earth.
Yes.
That is unbelievable.
Yes,
it is unbelievable. It is the coolest.
Yeah.
If you could, what more? Like, is this not a miracle? What really? Like, what could be more of a miracle?
I mean, the whole of this universe, all by recent count, 2 trillion galaxies, with hundreds of billions of suns in each galaxy, and countless planets that probably have produced sentient life billions of years ago. That the whole universe, as the ETs say, the Ebens, so-called, say that the universe is a soul manufacturing facility. And so the fact that we don't need to believe anything, because it's unbelievable, because belief is really not necessary to recognize what we are. So the whole thing is that the cosmos, from being nothing at all, the void, as we spoke of in November of 2019, the void, in that it cannot avoid itself as being dimensionless, can be also known as every dimensionless point in the potential of three-dimensional reality, which is just the fluctuating relationship of dimensionless points. And so we are the fluctuating relationship of dimensionless points that are held together by that which is dimensionless, that is the observer of three dimensions. And so we get to be nobody going nowhere forever, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. Yeah. Right.
There's actually a physics prize, 5 physics prizes, $1,000 each, that you and I could win together by just offering this very video that we're on right now to the timing of it closes at the end of October. And they want to have explications through physics of consciousness. Exactly that. Because, of course, that's the most pivotal realization that has to be articulated to the new brain, this child, the verbal analytic new brain that is attempting to make a conceptual map of what is non-verbally sensed and felt. So that the body, heart, and mind as a triune brain, in the brain there is a triune body, heart, and mind that is represented here in this 3-pound universe. And it's attempting to make an equivalent of what is formless, completely and utterly formless and immeasurable and indefinable and unbelievable.
Right. And it's so alluring for the sense of self to avoid being nobody, nowhere, uh, nothing, without anything to achieve, to be peace, to be space. It's what? Why? Why would the sense of self ever want that when it's so happy in its little Barbie house that it's constructed, or Ken house, where it loves believing in the idea of its own identity being the body, and comparing itself and measuring itself to other bodies and feeling lack, and just being incessantly oriented towards its objective external reality. What's the main mechanism that brings consciousness back to its own nobodiness and spaciousness and love? What is the main one? Is it meditation? Is it psychedelics? Is it shadow work, psychotherapy? Is it a conglomeration of all of those things? Is it science and spirituality merging together into a grand unity? What is it? And how can you shepherd that?
It's I think that with meditation and contemplation and being honest with ourselves, we realize that unless we are conscious of consciousness, we're overly identified with things and thoughts and activities which never satisfy.
Never.
No matter what we get a hold of, the top-down Cadillac, and the great gal or guy, it really doesn't satisfy for very long. In fact,
Right.
we become honest. If we take ayahuasca, we're like, our conscience is magnified about 1,000,000 times, and we realize that we've been totally lying to ourselves, that we're egocentrically idiotic, and that we're completely miserable idiots. And so when the plants, which have been evolving a lot longer than us, let's say, they're in unity consciousness in order to survive and thrive in the exigencies of nature, of downpours and whatever might be going on in nature. They have to adapt. We're in our little caddis shells, in our little hovels, going like, oh, huddling to try to survive, because we're we're trying to invent. Nature through us is attempting to invent some new way of being, because everything at the level of form has to be incomparably unique every moment, because form, in order to be like formlessness, has to, through observational measurement in quantum mechanics, has to observe itself to be what it appears to be perceptually. And through that measurement structure, which is a spatial, temporal, energetic, and material mind-body structure, form the focus of the next observation, which transforms that spatial, temporal, energetic, and material mind-body measurement into the next observation. So there is the evolution of observational consciousness as embodied by us, by you and I, and 8 billion people, and every bug and leaf and creature on this planet. And the universe is expanding at an ever accelerating rate for that reason as well. The whole cosmos is being reinvented. And that's one of the most amazing things about existence, is that the whole universe can be incomparably unique continuously, not just incrementally. It's a continuous representation, deconstruction, and representation of itself taking place continuously. It's not contiguous moments that one after the next that can appear that way, but it's actually that every dimensionless point in 3 dimensions is undivided. They share a single polar point that we call the 4th dimension of space, which was suppressed when James Clerk Maxwell, in the quaternion theory, William Clifford, who died quite early, showed this. Kaluza and Klein had a model that Einstein almost used. Louis de Broglie, who I'm not pronouncing his name properly, said that every particle shared a single singularity that is omnipresent. Okay, and when this one talked with Nassim Haramein on the phone for the first time, this was 10 years ago. Nassim, what about what de Broglie said, that there's all particles share one singularity? He said, oh, I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, I'll have to look back into that. Yes, I agree that the whole universe shares a single singularity. And so that singularity, though, is also at every single dimensionless point in the coordinate locations of 3D, which are, how many dimensionless points can there be in 3D? Well, there's more dimensionless points in 3D than there are anything else in the universe. There's a plethora of dimensionless points that are all sharing a single polar point, that make the whole universe an instantaneous, indivisible, holographic recreation that is recreating itself through consciousness. This awakeness, that aspect of awareness that, like a mirror in our bathroom, has no image of its own, it is choiceless. And so we have no image of our own ultimately, and we can learn to accept that because we can understand it here cognitively, conceptually. We can understand how we are nobody going nowhere forever. And when we can finally understand it conceptually with this new child like aspect that grew out of our reptile and out of our mammal, to be able to focus awakeness more precisely than these fields of emotions and fields of sensations could ever possibly do. And so the conceptual brain can be used, the left brain primarily. The right brain is largely mitigating the sensory and emotional, nonverbal through the vagus nerve to interface with this new child of conceptualizing consciousness in some precise, very precise way to locate it. Like, where is this nothingness? Where is this observer that we all are? How can we all share a commonly sensed, holy, heartfelt, conscious intelligence forever and ever, amen, and have heaven on this planet and have an enlightened species-wide society that lives in joy, in unconditional love every single instant?
Yeah. uh,
It's so wonderful to feel how the dust settles from all that energetic blah blah. It just, all the dust particles just fall to earth and to nothingness, and we're at peace. Peace. All the pieces fall together, and the puzzle, all the puzzled pieces that are so puzzling to us, they just effortlessly and automatically all fall together and represent the PEACE that we all know and love so dearly and completely.
yeah. How could anything ever beat just doing nothing and feeling absolute peace and wholeness?
It's modeling how to do it right now. When you say, this is the example that that science has been looking for, the objective evidence that it's possible to sense, feel, and think about that which is thoughtless. That which is formless, that which is unmanifest. Nikola Tesla said that in one sentence, that when science begins to study the non-physical, non-material aspect of reality, that it will make more progress in a year than it has in all the centuries of its past. Something like that. It's the exact quote. So it's not about setting aside the blah blah. It's realizing that the blah blah is not only blah blahing, it's also utterly and completely silent and immeasurable and unknowable simultaneously. That's the the alpha and the omega, the void and not avoiding itself.
Yeah, it's musical notes and the space. And if the musical notes are about heaven on earth and peace and love and abundance and prosperity, then they're harmonious. It's one way of looking at it. And if they're not, then they sound like nails on a chalkboard. So why not just be space, be love, be empty, and just allow most harmonious notes to just effortlessly and spontaneously, without a doer, controller, just express themselves into generating even greater peace, love, harmony, abundance, prosperity. Yeah. And it's really cool, actually, Sperry. I like how much you've pieced together in the last couple of years the core of the spiritual wisdoms with the core of the scientific wisdoms, and are speaking to the synthesis of them. And it does feel like that's very deeply at the core of also bringing us all together, is that because there's a lot of um, there's a lot of reliance um, within the matrix on, hey, what are scientists saying about consciousness right now? And that can be a really good gateway to get people to care a little bit more about meditation, or about entheogens, or about prayer and contemplation, self-inquiry, shadow work, all of that. You gotta do it. You gotta do it. You gotta do it. You can't break free from the chainless chains unless you actually deconstruct all of the illusions that you're using to hold yourself in your sense of self. So it's good, Sperry. I'm glad you're on that, and I am too. And it feels like we're more mature. It feels like we're more ripe and ready for collaborations and prosperity together and with our networks and projects, which is really good. So Sperry's been on de-hypnotizing. Would you like to share? I mean, you already have been, but specifically the multimedia project. And
Well, I was really struck, Alan. Thanks for asking. That there have been multiple, career hypnotists that have come to the groups and have said variations of, Sperry, you're de-hypnotizing people by bringing them into unity, this indivisible communion. And that really struck me that, wow, yeah, the challenge, which is an enormous challenge, is to de-hypnotize humanity. How do you go about de-hypnotizing 8 billion people? who are at each other's throats, polarized against each other, and destroying the ecosystem of this planet. With the media being owned by the Havemeyer group and and by the power elite, who want to eliminate the majority of us so that they can have their own Garden of Eden. And then they'll probably they don't know what else to do except kill each other. So don't think that's going to work out too well. So, they need to recognize how to be free of that vice grip on controlling tyrannically everybody else around them as their greater body, heart, and mind. They have to I have to lose weight, so I have to get rid of 95% of humanity. So they're just going about it in their own kind of psychotic, sociopathic way. And if we can have some empathy for them and not make them the enemy and polarize against them, they might actually feel that and not be so fearful of us as the majority, for example. What do you say about that, Alan?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, isn't that what this is? Really is when you're watching content, aren't you kind of being hypnotized by the person that's speaking at varying levels of hypnosis, let's say? And if the hypnosis is around deconstructing illusion into greater freedom, isn't that what you see?
Those the best. So much of the great work that's being done online by presenters is to expose the truth about all this craziness of the genocidal initiatives that have been in the pipeline for so many decades. And they're doing a great job, and that's a job that needs to be done. Yet the addressing, as we are here, our essential nature, which is already liberated, that cannot be destroyed and cannot be dominated because there's nothing to dominate. That is something that also needs to be happening. And my sense is that, Alan, you and I are innately bound to collaborate in this way, that nature created us, which it obviously must have. Did we create ourselves? Unless we are the void, regenerating itself as at the level of form to expand the incomparable uniqueness of every moment, because the void is incomparably unique every moment. It forces form and space and time, energy, matter to be incomparably unique every moment, precisely because it serving as the observer that is reconnecting and deconstructing and representing in this mirror of awakeness. It is utterly and completely unique. It's immeasurable and unknowable and boundless and timeless, but it's an eternal now. And that everything that is created by this eternal now has to be incomparably unique as well. There's no choice about it. It's choiceless. And so if we choose to be choiceless deliberately, we are liberated into the joy of being consciousness itself together.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Have so much peace and space that what is just a mirror for the sense of self in another to decontract its delusions into the expanse of being more like space and love and mirror. So be free of your own delusions and distortions so that your reflections can be very pure reflections. Even just hugging when the mind of other is proliferating and just going and hugging and kissing and loving, just that can be enough for the mind to see its illusions and to relax into greater space and love. So many times words aren't needed. Yeah, I'm really happy. I think so too, Sperry. I feel so too. There is a lot of synergy and play that's here, that's actualizing itself, and it's powerful. It's blossomed a lot. It's matured and ripened a lot. I keep feeling this with very special cases of recontact, and yeah, and it's funny because you also simultaneously don't want to contact. So it's like, yeah, but that's a whole nother thing. I'll make more content about that later. But what happens if you don't contact any sense data at all? What happens then? What are you left with?
Well, I think what I sense you're pointing to is what happens in deep contemplative meditation is the silence and the stillness that is the only reality. Ultimately, everything else is temporeal, never the same way twice. So there's that which is the only constant in the whole of consciousness becomes conscious of itself, and in that is the attractor. It's like a magnet. It attracts understandings and insights and inventions and creations that have never happened before, that are solutions to the deepest of all problems, and are the self-discovery of like, who the heck am I, and who are we, and where are we going, and why are we going there, and all of that is revealed effortlessly and spontaneously.
Yes.
Without even asking it to be revealed. We don't have to create our own reality. We are the most amazing, by doing nothing and making no effort and being nobody. We are regenerating the phenomenology of our forms and minds and hearts and bodies and social matrices, and we're renewing ourselves completely. We're liberating ourselves, taking, the weakest link in the chain. It determines how strong the chain is. And the weakest link is the fact that there's no chain.
Sperry, can you give us a existing list of the most the projects that you're giving your most amount of time to, and then listing down from the top of the ones that are most, especially for people to hear about and potentially get involved in. And then we can put the links in the bio, also in the description.
Well, it took from my near-death experience at age 4, where I existed without a body, heart, or mind, without any boundary, and there was no me. There was just this emptiness, which was aware of itself as this awakeness that is choiceless and formless. That was quite an education, experiential education. So when one came back into this one's 4-year-old little boy body, asked, because this one was playing Zorro, when this tree limb fell on him, attempted to ask, like coming off of DMT, when you try to ask a question and the answer comes to you before you finish asking the question, was exactly like that. And the answer came back and was shown kinesthetically that everything fluctuates in and out of form. And this one saw fields, the whole of nature fluctuating in and out of formlessness and being renewed and recreated continuously. And so the first thought that this one had as a 4-year-old little boy was, well, why would Zorro need to know this? Because Zorro was trying to learn how to save the day because of the double suicides of my grandmother and grandfather when I was 2 and 4. My mother's father and mother. And I felt her grief, but she wouldn't share it with me. And I was like, I feel her grief, but why won't she share it with me? I need to be Zorro to save the day. So here, this brought about this playing on this branch of a tree that had died. And this one at 4 knew nothing about branches breaking, and so Zorro ended up underneath without going into the whole thing. I mean, this one has spent a lifetime figuring out, okay, obviously this is a way of making sense of the whole shebanginess of life, and that more people are having near-death experiences. As of maybe 20 years ago, there were 10 million people just in the United States alone that had reported having near-death experiences. Imagine what that actually is on a worldwide level, that nature, as us, is educating us through showing us that we're nobody going nowhere forever. And how magnificently beautiful that is. It's so joyful. And when Eckhart Tolle says, make friends with the now, and he writes the book Stillness Speaks, and everything is culminating towards us being able to share a commonly sensed, holy, heartfelt, conscious intelligence as an indivisible being. And these ATs are making contact to us in the, like Emery Smith, who was working in these, military corporate places east of Albuquerque, and he'd earned their respect. And they said, okay, we're going to introduce you to your first ET, Emery. Tomorrow you'll meet him. And he's an interdimensional ET. He'll appear in front of you. And so Emery figured out the 150 questions to ask this ET, because he was like, young guy is being educated to be a doctor, to do all these operations and tissue samples and stuff of ETs. And so here he's going to meet this ET, and the ET appears and answers his 150 questions in under a second, telesomatically, because when you share, a somatic, empathetic, conceptualizing consciousness in an integrated way as two people, you can't lie. You're sharing what there is that can be known and felt and sensed and noticed with another person, even though you're an ET from another race. And the ET said to him, Emery, look, we've been tinkering with you for hundreds of thousands of years. I mean, there's quite a few different intergalactic civilizations that have been messing around with you, but you're like our children. We've been cultivating you to be better than we've ever been, just like your children. You want to go beyond what how you ever been. And so you're our heroes, Emery. But even though we sense that we're millions of years in advance of you, we're all equals. It's only because the billions of people in my civilization, because we all share an indivisible consciousness, consciously in a fully embodied way together, that our neurophysiological psychology is millions of years in advance of yours, but that doesn't make us better than you. And so Emery's like, he's melting and melting and melting in the love of this extraterrestrial. He can barely stay standing. He can see himself falling to his knees and being completely and utterly disintegrated by being love itself with this beautiful person, this entity in front of him, for heaven's sakes, that is inside of him with every intimacy that the subatomic level. You know what I'm saying? So it's knowing this. Experience is the teacher. Shared experience is the teacher. And so over the last 45 years, I finally realized 45 years ago, there must be a way that I'm being shown to bring people to this shared experience, this shared intimacy of being indivisible, awake, aware, sentience, and that that the whole cosmos is on its way in a path of evolution from nothingness to being fully sentient as spatial, temporal, energetic, material, mind embodied beings. And here we are. And so I put together ultimately all my 45 years of clinical, empirical research that was replicated by multiple laboratories around the world that I set out back in 1988 with Dr. William Braud, who was the senior research associate at the Mind Science Foundation, to see he was award-winning psychophysiologist. I mean, he's one of the most astounding researchers that was heralded and award-winning, and people would, dear of friends were people like Russell Targ and Harold Putoff and Ed May, who were given the millions of dollars by the United States federal government to compete with the Russian research into parapsychological remote viewing and being able to know the future before it happened under empirical conditions with double-blind studies. So Dr. William Braud became my closest friend when I first met him physically and sat in front of him when I traveled there across the United States to be in San Antonio, Texas, at the Mind Science Foundation. I was finally there sitting in front of Dr. William Braud. He was so peaceful. I couldn't stop crying. I just was like weeping for joy. It was like, oh God, this man is amazing. And for 5 years we worked together. He said, Sperry, you're like another Krishnamurti. What you're doing, I'll put you in touch with all the top researchers in the field of consciousness. And this project that you want to do, which replicates what you and I have done together with these cohorts of 30 people that one of which you trained to share a commonly sensed consciousness, to be tested after the first group that didn't go through your training, and they reversed from being made nervous when they had no known way of knowing when they were being noticed over a closed circuit camera monitor system, while their bodies were being measured with galvanic skin response, which William Braud was a master of. It was like an extension of his body. He was able to find how people were reacting to the most subtle, cues and differentiations that were occurring in their environment with other people. And so it was found that those people who wanted to be with other people, but they were made nervous by being with other people, that when they were stared at over closed circuit camera monitor systems, where they could have no other known way of knowing when or if they were being stared at, those are the people that were most activated. And we had all this clinical evidence to show that attention can be used as the stimulus, just like touching your nose is a stimulus. And I know that my finger is touching my nose, that my paying attention to you when you have no known way of knowing when or if that's happening, when we're separated under the shielded electromagnetic shielding conditions, that when I pay attention to you in an undivided way, you feel it, even if you don't consciously know it, because your your nervous system responds to my attention, just like a reptile walking into a new glade out of its home, in the silence and stillness of its presence, can sense whether there are other predators ready to pounce on it from behind some bush. We had to grow and develop that capacity in order to survive, okay? Even Sigmund Freud, as conservative as he is, he said that telepathy, somatic telepathy, was innate to us as animals, that's the only way we could actually survive, and that was suppressed as we entered into verbal analytic conversations and gave most of our undivided attention to who we think we are and what we think we're doing at a verbal analytic level. And the silence, the field of sensory intelligence and the field of emotional intelligence, which makes up 97% of our moment-to-moment consciousness, 77% of our embodied intelligence, is being suppressed by this child that's saying to the heart, which is like its mommy, and the body, the reptile, which is like its daddy, which is like conditional love, and the heart is like the unconditional love of the mother, saying, mommy, daddy, what's this? What's that? Give me a label for what I'm conceptually experiencing non-verbally with you both. And so we have this growth incrementally over hundreds of millions of years, emergent. And here we are right now in this eternal now, discovering what has been recreated out of absolutely nothing whatsoever to be us, and beholden to serve the greater good of all life everywhere in the cosmos by being peaceful and all loving and recognize and respect this communion of indivisibility of being. And so the $27 million multimedia partnership proposal offered to all of you who are hearing this right now. Please let us join together in collaboration to serve our greater purpose of bringing about an enlightened civilization on this planet. Whatever it is that we each uniquely are capable of doing to contribute to our awakening, let's do it from this moment onward. And so all the physics that have been brought together, all the physicists and biologists and neuroscientists and sociologists and psychologists that I've brought together over the last 45 years, all the tens of thousands of people that have come to these groups, let us all come together now and step into this, heavenly place, this eternal now, where we cannot die. We are, as they say, in the ancient Hindu and Buddhic and contemplative traditions, that when we recognize in life who and what we truly are, that when we physically die, we don't die, we realize that we are deathless. And the afterlife has been studied by a friend of mine here who was introduced to me by my physics partner, who's spent 50 years studying the afterlife, written 22 books. And these people like William James, who was one of the top people 100 years ago, has communicated through Jane, what's her name, who wrote Seth Speaks, Jane Roberts. William James after he was dead, contacted Jane Roberts and said, I want to publish a book. I want to channel a book through you. And she recognized it and honored it and did that. And some of the most magnificent understanding of the afterlife, of what it is to be 10,000 times as joyful, to be 10,000 times as agonized about how unconscious and insensitive we were on the earth plane, how that unfolds and how we take responsibility as that which cannot suffer for how crazy we've been here. And so we continue to learn and unlearn and are born again every instant passing. And we're all doing this. It's so fantastic. It's like a rave where we're all on, MDMA. When I met Sasha Shulgin for the first time, the fellow who put together MDMA with his wife, and I was introduced to him by one of my dearest friends, and I stepped into his aura. He's a big guy. It was like stepping into the cosmos. I literally saw stars and planets in vast empty space, and I felt utter and complete peace in his presence, and that I shared as one single nobody with him, and it was pure love. Sasha Shulgin was an amazing man who, created MDMA so that we could all learn and use it as a stepping stone into our immortal nature. So this $27 million multimedia partnership proposal that involves feature and documentary films, which bring audiences through, by breaking the fourth wall, bring them into a commonly sensed, holy, heartfelt, conscious intelligence with the people on screen who are already anchored in this indivisibility. And we end up in, let's say, in one example, a stadium of 60,000 people, like giant stadium. And there are multiple cameras recording this that are put together to make the film, the 90 to 120-minute film, and various clips of that, where people in the audience are brought into unity consciousness by the people in the New Thought movement and the consciousness movement in a circle. People like Eckhart Tolle and Deepak Chopra and Marianne Williamson and so forth at center stage, who are sharing what they're sensing and feeling together in an undivided way as a greater body, heart, and mind with 60,000 other people. And those people at home who are watching, maybe just as indivisible individuals. And we see them on the film too, because we're recording those people. And some groups are being actually psychophysiologically, for their autonomic and central nervous systems, being recorded simultaneously. We see them in the film. And so, like the Beatles created the first simulcast when they sang, all there is love, or love is all there is. That was the first simulcast on the planet Earth. We have the first simulcast of this film sharing indivisibility of our commonly sensed consciousness as a species on this planet, to make it experientially plausible that we can be safe and secure by embracing our infinite, immeasurable depth and beauty as consciousness, as joy, as Eckhart Tolle would say. We are the joy of being is the joy of being consciousness together. So that's basically the aegis of the project, is to use social media to make it available around the clock in multiple languages for free as a free membership at any time of the day or night. Just click a button and you can be there with total strangers or groups that you create for free and enter into this commonly sensed common sense. It's like all leaders in the whole of history have said, please, people, use your common sense. And what is common sense telling us right now? It tells us that we're already free, and we just need to notice it and feel it and share it indivisibly forever and ever. Amen. As love itself. Wow. As Christ consciousness, as the Atman, as the Anatta, as the no self, as the one self, as all selves, knowing what we are forever and ever have been and ever will be and ever present spirited, all the indigenous cultures who say the Great Spirit is everything, it is everyone, it is all that ever has been and ever will be and is now. And so all the indigenous cultures are included here indivisibly, and we are all awakening to our combined wisdom. And the wisdom comes through the wisdom of humanity. As Bruce Lipton said years ago, with being interviewed by Alan, his last name will come to me in a moment, Steinfeld, Bruce said, nature has created us to be like, out of zygotes, to be multiple zygotes, functioning as a single consciousnesses. And when all human beings realize that they're just cells, like zygotes are cells in us, we are cells in the body of humanity. When humanity can speak as one humanity, as one sentient consciousness with other sentient consciousnesses from other intergalactic civilizations, then we will be allowed into and become part of this commonly sensed consciousness within this solar system and within this galaxy, with hundreds and thousands of other extraterrestrial or interterrestrial civilizations, and we will join this cosmic sentient recreation. And the one, as his name is going to escape me, he says, there's, as with the ETs, that there's only one people here in this universe. There's only one of us. How many us's can there be? There's only one life, one nature, one cosmos, one unified verse, and we are it together. So all of this cognition, all these labels, all these sticky notes, we don't need to make our mirrors opaque with things and thoughts and activities that occlude the ability to receive and reflect.
Yeah.
Here we are on this two-dimensional screen on Zoom. It's, the most advanced physicists like Susskind at Stanford, creating the holographic model that the whole three-dimensional reality can be represented in two-dimensional surface. Here we are represented on a two-dimensional surface on Zoom. we are a three-dimensional hologram being represented on a two-dimensional surface, which is a mirror-like meeting place, which is essentially a dimensionless meeting place made out of dimensionless points that are, when you take 2 points, you have a line. Before that, you just have a point. You have 2 points, make a line. 3 points, make a plane, a two-dimensional surface. Wait a minute, forget it. Where's this? So there's just one over here. Okay, you get 4 points and you turn them so they're orthogonal or perpendicular to each other. You now have the first three-dimensional volume. You have a tetrahedron, which is the strongest structure in nature. And we see in the actual, quantum mechanics of probability fields and in the biology of particles, or the quantum mechanics of particles and the biology of cells and so forth, there is this resonant structure that is ubiquitous, that is fundamental to form. And we can begin to recognize all these things. And so the conceptual mind becomes satisfied. We have to satisfy the conceptual mind.
Yeah.
So that it can work with the field of, indivisible field of sensations and the indivisible field of emotions. So there is this bicameral left and right brain, the right brain representing the part in the body through the vagus nerve connected throughout the body. And it's trying to come into this relationship with this conceptualizing new feature, this child, which is reaching for some way of creating a conceptual version of what is non-verbally felt and sensed. And that's all we have to just contribute to that in whatever way we can every moment consciously.
Yeah.
And then we will know who and what know our purpose and serve it joyfully together.
And so that's the mission and ethos of both the Connection Institute, but also the $27 million multimedia partnership proposal.
Yes.
Excellent. And so the best way for people to engage with that is, like you said, just be right here engaged with your own direct experience of awakening, but also is to check out I have it pulled up and I'll have it in the description below. So is it both connectioninstitute.org, but also for the proposal, it's the De-Hypnotizing Humanity proposal that is up there, right?
That's right. I have all those in a description of other that I can just paste into the description of this video.
Awesome. Okay. Nice. Nice. And by the way, I was mentioning this to Sperry also, that the fourth wall is a very beautiful, even right now, that's what we're doing. This is it. Like this right here. This is talking to the audience. Right. And so if the people that are talking to each other like this are anchored in love and space, and then something happens there that's beautiful, noteworthy, and the cast turns to the audience and engages them. How do you guys feel right now after that beautiful shift? You know, that kind of stuff. Like after that decontraction, how does that make you feel? And so now we're really in the territory of advanced media. I think breaking the fourth wall is one of the most beautiful ways to bring forth advanced media and waking up through content creation. It's super exciting stuff, Sperry. All about it.
It's so exciting that this has been trying to break through. That, as I said, that Louis de Broglie and Kaluza and Klein and James Clerk Maxwell and all pointed to this fourth dimension of space, not time, that instantaneously united all points in 3D. But in the Solvay conference, the conservative element said, no, we can't measure it. And lo and behold, it's because it's immeasurable. There's nothing to measure. And so the conservative element said, well, we can't measure it, so it can't be considered physics. And they threw it out. And if they had accepted it, Einstein would have made the fourth dimension of time the fourth dimension of space-time, because time is the observer of space. Time is timelessness, making the whole of space instantaneously indivisible. It's the observer. It's the unborn, uncreated, deathless awakeness that is choiceless and formless, that is causing form to reform and become more and more like formlessness, so that slowly but surely our forms, our bodies, hearts, and minds are becoming as flawlessly indivisible from what all that we are at the level of form, as formlessness is indivisible from formlessness. So we are becoming more like the void at the level of form, which is really enlightened consciousness. That's when form and formlessness, where here they are, here's formlessness, here's form, and they cannot exist without each other. Without formlessness, form would not have independent, interconnected attributes that can move independently of each other. It all depends on the form utilizing this indivisibility of formlessness. And so, because they are one without a second, in the phase transition between formlessness and form, and I explained this, of course, when we were speaking and meeting back in November of 2019, that in the phase transition, like between water and ice or water and gas, the phase transition between these absolute opposites. I mean, nothing could be more opposite than formlessness and form. But in the phase transition that unites the two, what is that? That is consciousness. That is this, but not that. That's like, netty, not this, not that. It is this, but not that. It is this, but not that. That is what is the anatta and the atman simultaneously. It's you and me. There's you and there's me. It's not that I, occlude or overarchingly take precedence over you. That's like a very mechanistic, materialistic, sociopathic model of like, who's going to eat who here? Who's going to, who's going to do the eating and who's going to do the loving? Let's say, who's going to be the lover? Are you going to be the woman, or am I going to be the woman? Are you going to be the man? Am I going to be the man? It's all this polarization to just forget, let that all be what it is. Because between the gender war between men and women, when they can share a commonly sensed, holy, heartfelt, fully embodied, awake, aware consciousness that is conscious of itself, then they can have unconditional, eternal love and have marriages that last and have children that are brought up in the indivisible, unconditional love of their parents. So children when they're first born and they come in like la 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 la, they're not afraid of anything. Nature creates us when we're newborns to be lit up and turned on. We're lit up. We're so excited to be what we are. And we're not afraid of not knowing who we are. We're completely ignorant and innocent, utterly and completely. When I had my son, I could hold him on my arm with his head in my palm of my hand and roar him around in the air, recklessly, but securely. He had no fear at all. He had no concept of fear. So we can bring up children on this planet through our communion with them as consciousness itself with no fear. So we're not traumatized by being objectified as good little girl, good little boy. This is your mommy, that's your daddy. This is this, that's your that. This is your sister's toy. Give it back to your sister. Eat your oatmeal, or I'll slap you, or I'll make you wrong, or make you feel that you as a separate object, as my little boy, or whatever, is not behaving the way I want you to. And that kind of blame and that kind of shame and that kind of tyrannical control over us as if we're a separate subject, a pawn on the chessboard of life, is absolutely traumatizing from the get-go. And when we can grow up on this planet without being treated as objects, and that we're not taught to treat our mothers and fathers and our caregivers as objects, we can feel this objectless heavenly unity and indivisibility of our being with everyone and everything continuously, and we can have a healthy civilization that can abide in joy forever after.
I love it, Sperry. Yeet. So I feel good about this convo. I feel like we can pause the recording and we can publish this and we can share it and galvanize greater movement for being present to one's own awakening right now, and also contributing to the Connection Institute in any way by seeing the resources and checking out the Multimedia project proposal. And I would like to hear, I'll put the link to the first conversation also in the description. And if you guys want to go and check that out too, the one that we did 3 years ago, that's really cool. And let us know also what you think about this one. We'd love to hear from you. Comment below, share it with those that you feel like it would resonate with, like it, subscribe, all that good stuff. Yeah. Any closing thoughts before we pause the recording, Sperry?
I was just listening to our recording from 3 years ago last night, and I wanted to suggest, as I have to some, from about a minute and a half to 32 minutes is the core of the physics being shared and felt and embodied by both of us. So that's, if you just listen that long, it's a long, long recording. We kind of get into all kinds of stuff later on that I kind of gets convolvulated and jumbled a bit because we're touching on all these things. And but that first 32 minutes is really well worth reviewing.
Nice. Perfect. All right. Love you guys. Thanks for tuning in, and just infinite love and light, peace, joy,
Yeah.
prosperity.
Yeah. Big hug and bye for now.